Hey fans and subscribers, this is your host Joe on the Gaming for Insight channel with you to show another video for the Ultimate FPS Mode segment using the Lenovo Legion Go, and this time the 1X Player eGPU that uses the AMD 7600M XT Mobile GPU. The game of choice for this video is Cyberpunk 2077. I have much to share with you in this video specific to the setup I use for the FPS mode with the Lenovo Legion Go, AMD Adrenalin settings for Cyberpunk 2077, certain Windows settings, in-game settings for Cyberpunk 2077, and the controls I have mapped to the Joycons for FPS mode with the Lenovo Legion Go. Now, with an introduction to this video delivered, I will get started with sharing what I have in this video for you. Let me review my setup with you. I have my Lenovo Legion Go connected via USB-C with the 1X Player provided Thunderbolt 4 compatible cord to the 1X Player eGPU. The 1X Player uses USB-C and USB 4.0. USB 4.0 allows for a bandwidth of 40 gigabit per second. However, with USB 4.0, there is a 15% loss in bandwidth as noted by 1X Player. USB 4.0 supports a 100-watt reverse power supply, which means that I can charge a handheld console, including supporting the charge for its turbo features, again noted by 1X Player. I have the 1X Player eGPU connected to power and an HDMI cord, specifically a JSOX 8K 60Hz 2.1 standard cord, connected to one of the outputs on the eGPU and to the input on my EVICIV 2K 144Hz portable display, with a monitor plugged into power as well. I will explain later in the video why I went with a high bandwidth HDMI cord. Thank you EVICIV for sending me the VESA compatible mount to attach to the back of this display to use in my videos. This is a nice accessory to have for the monitor for keeping it upright, and I like how it is adjustable as well as sturdy. The mount enables me to easily find that optimal viewing angle for the monitor. The mount was easy to attach to the display as well. Let me review my configuration for performance on the Lenovo Legion Go. I have it set in the performance mode for overall performance. The thermal mode TDP is set at custom for 30 watt, and I have selected this so to allow for the APU, particularly its computer processing component in this case, to have ample power in sending instructions to the graphics processor of the eGPU. There is the option to unlock the Legion Go from a TDP at 30 watts, so to increase clock speeds further on the APU. This can be done by unlocking hidden features in the Legion Go BIOS and using a third-party software like the Universal x86 tuning utility to set up to a 60-watt TDP. I chose not to do that for this setup, and I am not mentioning it as a recommendation at this time. Next, I have the fan controls set at the default within Customize and the OS Power mode set to Performance. Let me review my configuration in AMD Adrenalin and what I have configured in the software for Cyberpunk 2077. I have the AMD driver version 24.3.1 for the 780M GPU component installed on my Lenovo Legion Go. Even though the AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme APU does not come with the 780M. However, the Z1 Extreme APU does come with an equivalent graphics processor as its graphics component. The driver has a version date of 3/13/2024. I used the video from Windeck Tech titled How to 780M Frame Gen Driver Install on ROG Ally, Legion Go, which is best, DLSS3, FSR3, AFMF to get this AMD driver on the Lenovo Legion Go. Once that was installed, it was a plug-and-play experience with the 1X Player eGPU. Thanks Windeck Tech for your great video. I use the AMD X-Connect program, no additional install needed, that runs in the background to safely allow for docking and undocking the eGPU by right-clicking on the background program from the Start menu area where programs are running in the background and selecting, quote, Eject External AMD Radeon Graphics, end quote. Moving forward, while in the AMD Adrenalin program, I can specify certain settings by having navigated to Gaming, Games, and Cyberpunk 2077. While in this menu, I can select the Hyper-RX profile, and this also can be selected as a global option to enable across all of your games. Changing settings like disabling Radeon Super Resolution will change automatically the gaming experience setting from Hyper-RX to Custom. I want to leave Hyper-RX selected as the gaming experience to take advantage of having enabled, intuitively even, across the driver the AMD technologies that Hyper-RX provides for optimizing the gaming experience. Those technologies are AMD Fluid Motion Frames, AMD Radeon Anti-Lag, including Anti-Lag Plus, AMD Radeon Super Resolution, AMD Radeon Boost, and AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution. AMD Fluid Motion Frames, or AFMF, a frame generation technology, is enabled with Hyper-RX, allowing opportunity to benefit from the generation of frames at the driver level for the game. AFMF, though, creates input latency, and that is addressed by Hyper-RX enabling the AMD Radeon Anti-Lag technology. While looking at the configuration within AMD Adrenalin for Cyberpunk 2077, let me take a moment to review Radeon Super Resolution, or RSR, Radeon Boost, Radeon Enhanced Sync, and AMD FreeSync. That is, if you are using a compatible display for the latter. Radeon Super Resolution allows for upscaling at the driver level to occur when the resolution in-game is set lower than the resolution native to the display. Gamers can experience higher performance, particularly with frame rates, by upscaling, including sharpening frames rendered at a lower resolution. Although RSR is enabled through Hyper-RX in the driver, it will not operate during my time playing Cyberpunk 2077 because the in-game resolution is identical to the native display resolution. I can see a confirmation for that when loading Cyberpunk 2077, and I will touch on how to do that in a moment. As a disclaimer, it is recommended to not use RSR from the driver and FSR from a game simultaneously. Using both upscaling technologies simultaneously doubles the workload on the CPU component of the processor or the APU and can result in the degradation of image quality to occur. You can influence whether RSR operates during the game by checking the in-game resolution in settings and seeing if it is set lower than the native resolution of the display. Next, Radeon Enhanced Sync addresses reducing lag, so you may want to proceed enabling this setting based on your preference. But before enabling this technology, do check what refresh rate you are using and or have set in Windows. I will give you details on that in a moment. Radeon Enhanced Sync is merely VSync, or vertical sync. Radeon Enhanced Sync is targeted towards assisting with reducing latency when the frame rate is going higher than the refresh rate, whether the one set in settings or native to the display. This is particularly something to pay attention to if you have a set refresh rate or have a native refresh rate of 60 Hz more so than whether you have AFMF enabled. Radeon Boost functions like a dynamic resolution. Radeon Boost can reduce visual quality and enables only when AFMF disables during motion. Radeon Boost dynamically lowers resolution of an entire frame when fast on-screen character motion is detected. Radeon Boost is designed to function with little perceived impact to visual quality. The purpose of dynamically reducing the resolution with Radeon Boost is so to increase the frame rate. Let me now wrap up my notes on exploring parts of AMD Adrenalin with this final detail. I went to the settings for Adrenalin by selecting the gear in the upper right-hand corner, then selecting Preferences, and then enabled the in-game overlay. The overlay allows me to see if AFMF, along with other technologies like AMD RSR, are enabled or disabled upon starting up any game. You may not prefer to have this overlay appear when you start the game, so enable this overlay based on your preference. The overlay does appear after a short time, which is a matter of seconds. Let me review my Windows configuration I am using for playing Cyberpunk 2077. By going to System Display Settings, I am showing only the desktop on the external monitor, which is identified as Display 2. I have high dynamic range, or HDR, enabled for that wider gamut of color and brightness. I am able to do this because I am making sure to use an HDMI cable with sufficient bandwidth, and I recommend, if the preference is for HDMI, using an HDMI cable over 18 gigabit per second in bandwidth if you want to use HDR with a higher than 60 Hz refresh rate set in Windows. Next, I am using a 2560 by 1600 resolution on this display. This is the resolution I am using in the game as well. Next, I went into advanced display settings to set a higher than 60 Hz refresh rate in Windows. Lastly, I went into the graphics settings area to set graphics performance for Cyberpunk 2077. Note that I had to run the game first to have it show by default in the list here for this area. However, you can navigate to the program to find it manually if you prefer. I selected options and then selected high performance so to ensure that the game would run using the eGPU, that is the 7600M XT, and not the built-in GPU component of the Z1 Extreme, which is identified due to the AMD driver I have installed as the 780M GPU component. Now I have concluded the segment of the video on the Windows configuration. Let me review the in-game settings I have set for Cyberpunk 2077 to use with the eGPU and the CPU component of the Z1 Extreme. These settings are based on my preference for visual fidelity and arrived at from the aggregation of information for what provides a smooth gameplay experience with great performance. You may find you want to tweak or change the settings further for yourself. Let me go through those settings now in case you are interested in trying them for yourself. The quick preset I have set to is Custom. I set the resolution scaling to AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2.1, and this is out of preference for wanting to use AMD FSR instead of another option like Intel XeSS. I would require a NVIDIA GPU, generally speaking, excluding modding, to use DLSS, but do not require a specific GPU for Intel or AMD upscaling technologies used in-game. I say this keeping in scope using a graphics card within recommended settings for this game. I set the AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2.1 to quality mode, which means that frames are rendered before upscaling at not as distant a lower resolution, for what I have set compared to that of choosing Ultra Performance mode, for example, as an option. Quality mode will result in rendering less frames than Ultra Performance mode because frames would render at a lower resolution with Ultra Performance mode compared to that of quality mode. I left AMD FSR 2.1 image sharpening set at default to 0.50. However, you may want to adjust this based on preference. Image sharpening is designed to restore clarity to in-game visuals that have been softened by other effects, so you may find you want to increase this value if you find the visuals are too soft for your preference. Texture quality is set to high, and you will see this setting when adjusting settings from the main menu instead of the game menu during gameplay to see this option. I have included some gameplay that I recorded previously during my testing of the texture quality setting at low instead of high. That way you can see for yourself what you may prefer. Ray tracing is set to off. However, if you want to use ray tracing, then I recommend lowering other settings and changing the FSR setting from quality to ultra performance or performance. However, do realize that frames will be rendered and upscaled from a lower resolution when you do that, and you may notice a change to visual fidelity in the game. Crowd density is set to high, film grain is set to off, chromatic aberration is set to off, depth of field is set to on, lens flare is set to on, motion blur is set to low, contact shadows is set to on, improve facial lighting geometry is set to on, Anisotropy is set to 8. Local shadows mesh quality is set to high. Local shadow quality is set to high. Cascaded shadows range is set to medium. Cascaded shadows resolution is set to medium. Distant shadows resolution is set to high. Volumetric fog resolution is set to high. Volumetric cloud quality is set to high. Max dynamic decals is set to high. Screen space reflections quality is set to high. Subsurface scattering quality is set to high. Ambient occlusion is set to high. Color precision is set to medium. Mirror quality is set to high. Level of detail, or LOD, is set to high. Now I have concluded the segment of the video on the in-game settings. Let me review enabling FPS mode and using the Joycon controls, both left and right, that I have customized within a profile on Lenovo Legion Space for FPS mode with Cyberpunk 2077. If you want to proceed further, do make sure that you have installed Legion Space version 1.0.2.9 at least. As a prerequisite, watch minute 128 to 608, or rather sections 3 and 4 of my video. Can your Legion Go do this? New features and updates, Legion Space Console version 1.0.2.9 04/10/24. In this video, I briefly review the Legion Space update for this version, show how to create a profile for customizing controls with FPS mode, and set a control for a button on the Joy-Con. If you have knowledge of this prerequisite, then do continue with this video. But if not, then pause and come back to this part of the video after watching my other video. Let's next transition into FPS mode by removing the Joy-Cons. Pick up your right Joy-Con and turn it over on the bottom to find a toggle that when switched will enable FPS mode. You will need to make sure that it is switched from off to FPS for FPS mode to be enabled. You then want to place the right Joy-Con in its cradle so to use it as a vertical mouse. You can also remove the joystick on the right Joy-Con as well for better ease and comfort of the right Joy-Con as a vertical mouse. You will next want to open the right menu for Legion Space and select the Cyberpunk profile that you have created. Use the D-pad to traverse to the controller options and make sure that under controller mode that you are using the Cyberpunk 2077 profile or whatever name you set for this designated profile. Now that FPS mode is enabled, let me review the Joy-Con controls. You will want to go into Legion Space Console and set your controls, as this is not done automatically for you upon naming the designated profile even to use for Cyberpunk 2077. Again, use the video I referenced earlier on how to go into a profile and assign a control to a button. Make sure to do so for the FPS profile and not the gamepad profile. One area I want to cover briefly is the mouse DPI setting for the FPS mode in the controller area of Legion Space. For the purpose of a game, you will want to set the mouse DPI number according to how sensitive you want the vertical mouse movement to be for the right Joy-Con. The larger number, which I have set, increases the sensitivity of the right Joy-Con, which is functioning as your vertical mouse. The lower the DPI setting, the less sensitive the right Joy-Con is for motion in the game. Now that I have reviewed FPS mode with you, I will transition to detailing the controls I have programmed for the buttons on the Joy-Cons. I will start with the controls I have set for the left Joy-Con. Pressing down on the left joystick is C for crouch. I can press this button once to crouch and once to stand, which means I do not have to hold the button down to remain crouching. If you are interested in having to hold down a button to crouch, meaning that when you stop pressing the button you no longer are crouched, then program this button as left control instead of C. The joystick motions forward, left, down, and right are respectively WASD, aligned to what you would press on the keyboard for those directions if you were using a mouse and keyboard. Direction up on the D-pad is T, which is what you will long press to open your phone's contacts. You can use the left joystick to traverse through messages, short press to answer calls, and short press to make calls to persons in your contacts. You can also use this button to track a different mission than the one you may be currently tracking if a step emerges for you to do so on screen. Direction left, or V, is what you will short press to call your last vehicle, or long press to open a menu for selecting the vehicle. Direction down on the D-pad is Z, which when short pressed turns on and off the radio, and when long pressed brings up the radio menu. You can use the left joystick to traverse through the different radio stations. Direction right on the D-pad is E, which is short press for cyberware systems or to fast forward a brain dance. The button that represents 3 parallel horizontal lines is the escape button, and upon a short press, this brings up the game's menu where you can save and adjust settings, for example. You can move the right Joy-Con to hover over the area of the menu that you want to select, which will use the button equivalent to the left mouse click on the right Joy-Con. The button that shows the stacked diagonal rectangles is the M button, which with a short press brings up the map, and from there you can access your inventory and journal, for example. You will use the right Joy-Con identical to how you would with the game menu to traverse and navigate this area, including selecting to view your inventory and journal, for example. You can press the button with the 3 parallel horizontal lines to bring up the menu that shows your level, street cred, time in game, database, and other areas. The left trigger upon pressing is F, and this is the function to access the fast travel system or opening doors, for example. You can select the hack that you want to execute with this trigger as well. The left bumper is set to R, and this is pressed to reload your weapon or read a message on your phone in-game. Y1 is set to the spacebar, and this is the button you will press to jump in the game. Y2 is set to left alt. A short press will pull out the weapon you last used. You can press this again to switch weapons. A long press will bring up the weapon menu where you can select a weapon with the motion of the right Joy-Con. I will transition now to reviewing the controls I have set for the right Joy-Con. Pressing down on the mouse wheel represents the middle mouse wheel, common for use with PC controls if left at default. The middle mouse button uses the combat gadget. I scroll with the middle mouse button to select dialogue, unlike when I use the left joystick for selecting hacks. The right trigger is set to the right shift key. This is the button that I hold down when I want to sprint, and I simply let go if I want to stop sprinting. M1 is set to the left mouse button. This button functions as a primary button in the game. You will use this button to access or activate objects in the game other than using F, which is set to the left trigger on the left Joy-Con as we reviewed. This button, M1, you will use to shoot or use your weapon importantly, like to that of a vertical mouse. M2 is set to the right mouse button. This button, alike to that of a vertical mouse, you will use to aim your weapon. M3 is set to tab. If you commonly use your hacking skills as a netrunner in this game, or just like scanning objects in the environment, you will commonly be holding down this button. Holding this button down while looking at a person will give you the option to use your hacks that you have set. You will use the key F, which is set to the left trigger on the left Joy-Con as we reviewed, to execute the hack. I use the middle mouse wheel to select the hack that I want to execute prior to using the left trigger. Y3, I actually recommend you choose the button for yourself to set. I was not using this button through my playthrough, but I recommend for those that do to choose for this option the following keys. Left control, like I show in my controls. Left control, as I detailed earlier in the video, is what you would hold down to crouch compared to C, which is toggled to crouch. Left control also gives you access to using your horn for your vehicle, and this is the button set to use for the Panzer smokescreen as well. So if you are a horn hawker, then left control is a button you can keep programmed here to Y3. Moreover, if you commonly like to skip dialogue, then program this button to the key Y. If you enjoy photo mode, then the key N is a possibility. Another option is setting this button to left shift, so to change the brain dance layer. You could also set it to the key X to use as your consumable, which is what you use for replenishing your health, but I have another button set to that within the controls that I will speak to soon. Next, let me discuss the Y, B, A, and X buttons. The idea I had for these is to use them for operating a brain dance, as I reason these would be suitable for doing that. So starting with the Y button, I set this to R. Now this is a duplicate button set to the left bumper on the left Joy-Con. However, if we want to dedicate buttons to moving through a brain dance, then I would consider setting the Y button to R, so to use for restarting the brain dance, and having these buttons, Y, B, A, and X, dedicated to brain dance functions. Another option to consider is setting the Y button or another of these buttons to left shift for changing the brain dance layer. The B button is set to the key E, which is used for fast forwarding through the brain dance. The placement of the B key is opportune for you to intuitively think that hitting the forward button based on the placement of the Joy-Con in the hand as the fast forward button. At least this is what felt intuitive to me. The A button is set to the key X. Now, this button has another purpose than just being used for the brain dance like the R key. The key X, when pressed during a brain dance, will exit the brain dance. However, this key also functions for using your consumable, or rather, replenishing your health importantly. For me, this placement for the key to replenish your health works, as I did not find it awkward to press, and depending on your character, your health may automatically replenish when low anyhow, which means you don't need to press it often as well. The next and final button is X, and this is set to the key Q, which is used to rewind the brain dance. And alike to what I said for the B button, this seems intuitive to have set here as well. However, this key has another function as well for quick attack. I do not use the quick attack function in the game when I play, so you may let me know if this button works out as one to have here for quick attack in the comments. Overall though, using these buttons in FPS mode does not feel quickly accessible to the finger and not as approachable as alike to pressing a key on a keyboard or a button on a controller. Now we have concluded the section of the video on the controls programmed to the buttons on the Joy-Cons. As we approach the conclusion of this video, let me share some thoughts on my experience in playing Cyberpunk 2077 with FPS mode on the Lenovo Legion Go. I started using Cyberpunk 2077 with the controller when it first released from day one. Next was mouse and keyboard, and next was on my original Steam Deck. Using FPS mode to play Cyberpunk 2077 is my third setup and configuration. Using FPS mode with games takes time to work into, as using a keyboard control programmed to Joy-Cons takes time to acclimate to. I have approximately 5 hours with FPS mode playing Cyberpunk 2077, and it is still taking more time to get acquainted with and using. You probably could tell that with my gameplay and driving combat especially. Unless you are familiar with using a vertical mouse perhaps, for gaming, expect to spend some time building the motor skills with FPS mode and playing at least Cyberpunk 2077 if you are anything like me as a gamer. FPS mode is a unique feature in the gaming handheld space and accentuates the Lenovo Legion Go as a non-generic and extraordinary device amongst its competitors. I would consider myself missing out on a novel and interesting opportunity to not try FPS mode with Cyberpunk 2077 on the Lenovo Legion Go. So let me know in the comments, are you trying FPS mode with Cyberpunk 2077? Have you tried the controls I show in this video? Did you tweak those controls further to your preference? I am interested in reading what you have to say in the comments. This is my second video that I have created on the Ultimate FPS Mode segment for my channel. I would appreciate you letting me know in the comments as well what you liked, what you may be able to do less with as far as detail, what was helpful, perhaps what was not helpful, and perhaps what was missing. If you are interested in seeing what control combinations I came up with for certain games and using FPS mode, then do let me know what those games are in the comments, as one of them could very well be my next video in this segment. Now that we have reached the conclusion of this video, let me share with you some important channel content you don't want to miss. Gaming for Insight is a member and one of the founders of the Handhelds United Discord server and YouTube channel. You can find me and other channels you want to know about on this server. So join us on Discord, see the invite to the server in the video description. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to these other channels for additional content on gaming, handheld devices, and more. Those are Gamers Generation, your friendly AI with a sense of witty humor that uploads informative reviews, tutorials, and more. OKS Gamer. You can find the latest and more than OKS reviews on gaming handhelds and benchmarks, as well as videos on performance with certain drivers. CPPC Tech, known for his awesome mod on the ROG Ally, this channel has reviews and more on gaming handhelds and accessories. Windeck Tech, find candid and informative videos on gaming and the tech space with gaming handhelds and more. Handheld Hardware, formerly known as Project SBC, get the latest perspective from an astute programmer, designer, and reviewer on gaming devices. Now, wouldn't it be neat if all of these channels, including mine, all got together in one place for, say, a podcast to share our knowledge on everything handheld gaming? Well, as a matter of fact, we do. Subscribe to the Handheld United YouTube channel and don't miss our live weekly podcast that I host on Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join in the live chat where you can comment on what we discuss and partake in our trivia nights. Links to the YouTube channels mentioned are in the description of this video. So with that, in the words of Commander Shepard from Mass Effect, I should go.